welcome to another live for this one. We'll be talking about international students and studying in Canada at the undergraduate or graduate level. And so, welcome to this conversation. I am joined by Ruren. Hello, Ruren. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. So, I just want to make it clear before we get into this conversation, this little chat room, that, we're not, immigration lawyers or consultants. So, if you need legal advice or immigration advice, reach out to, those persons who have, that qualification to deal with, whatever case it is that you're having. All right. So with that said, Ruben, do you want to start us off in the context of, undergraduate or graduate level? What are your views on this topic this evening?
Well, interesting developments have been made since the IRCC has changed the policies that surround, international students, coming in. But it's good to see that, the information is placed out there. Not all yet, but, it's important for us to get that information, read through it, and see what best applies for you as an individual. But based on what I have seen and heard so far, it's better to pursue something at the graduate level.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to just start by just looking at one particular point that you mentioned, do your readings, do your research, because that is definitely important. So whether undergraduate or graduate level, do your research. That is so important. Ensure that you research the program, the school, the province, the city, the area that you're going to be in. So that is definitely important. The cost associated with studying in Canada as an international student, for sure, that is definitely important. And the other point was in the context of, studying at the graduate level. You mentioned, Ruren, based on, recent updates or developments from IRCC in the context of international students, you would believe that, studying at the graduate level, so doing graduate studies would be better for international students right now. So that's what you're saying there. Am I right?
Definitely correct. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. And I can understand, why you would take that position, given, all that has been happening, with these developments. And I am going to share, this with you. So IRCC, gave us some updates, I believe, on January 22nd. And, that pretty much has impacted, studying in Canada and what that will look like for you if this is what you'd like to do. And so, in that context, there were some developments in the context of capping, study permits for international students. And so, I guess we can start there. So, one, the cap will not impact, students at the graduate level. So that's a big indicator there to say that this cap really is for undergraduate students. So that's one big part there. And I would say the next other big development here is that, undergraduate students, they will require an attestation letter from the province, right, Ruren? And at this point, we don't know the process of what that will look like yet. So we're still here waiting for an update in that context. So in the context of the attestation letter, This is not a requirement for students at the graduate level. So whether you're doing a 1 year graduate level program, so once it's graduate, at the graduate level, you will not require this letter. So what is your take on these updates so far, Ruren, in the context of undergraduate or graduate level? And I believe so far the information is pretty much in your favor based on the position that you have taken.
Yeah, so definitely more requirements needed for the undergraduate, prospective undergraduate students. That those are the international ones. So a lot more, stringent rules are put on them. So it's going to be a little bit harder, I would say, for them to come here, well, come to Canada or go to Canada rather, and establish themselves. So they would have to make sure that they have, done their research, look at all that is necessary in terms of, you know, migrating to Canada and see if that makes sense. Because, studying overseas takes money, and that's going to be impacted for especially for undergraduate students.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm just looking in the chat and I am seeing Anne Marie Brown Walters. Hello and welcome, Anne Marie. So happy to have you here. And welcome to all, viewers, listeners, returning subscribers and viewers. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. All right, please remember to hit the like button, the share button, and the subscription button. Tell a friend to tell another friend about the Voices in Education. All right, so yes, I get what you're saying there, Ryan, and that's really a fair, decision to take in this context, given all the updates and, again, the importance of doing research. So another update here in the context of, undergraduate, and graduate students is that undergraduate students, so if you're coming to Canada, usually you could take your family along with you. So your common law partner, your spouse. So in that context, your partner or husband, spouse, or wife, they would receive an open work permit. They would receive an open work permit. But given this new update, that will no longer be the case in they said in the next few weeks. Not sure what that will mean in terms of timeline, but that was another update there. But that will remain the same for graduate students. So graduate students won't be affected in the context of, a spousal open work permit. So what is your take on that, on this one, Ruren?
Well, that is a critical one. Yeah, you need the support of your family, especially when you are away, and just to have your family near you is always important and critical to one feeling that sense of comfort when you move away from your homeland and you're all by yourself. You have all the other obstacles that will challenge you, like difference in culture, for example food, and just basic, how basically how to operate in another country. Some things that you might not have thought of before becomes a challenge as well. So you have to so-called acclimatize to the new culture, as well as if your family is left behind, thinking about them, and that lonesomeness can be you know a determining factor for persons who probably decide, well, I can't manage this. So just to have your family here and person who shares the same culture with you, that is important for you to probably say, all right, we can have a conversation. I know this person. Because when you migrate, you are around people that you don't know. You won't know everyone off the bat. So, it's good to have somebody that you know very well and, trust very well, that you can have that sense of comfort, at least when you're at home.
Yeah, for sure. And, that family support is a big one. And I am wondering, is it that Canada, well, I guess, they're capping, and let us be clear here, based on the update, the cap will be for 2 years. And then the government will revisit the policy and I guess make a decision from there. But in this context, you mentioned, about culture and the changes and just wanting that support. So is it that Canada, what do you believe Canada is doing in the context of these policies? Like, is it that they do not want, undergraduate international students here? Or do you believe that there is a genuine concern about, international students' well-being, given, housing, given how some institutions, I guess, treat them? So what do you believe is happening here?
Well, for me, I think it's a combination of a lot of those stuff. If people are coming to Canada, or people go to Canada and they are, not being treated well, then I think it's prudent for the government to, think about that as a possible, you know, way of regulating the system. And also, if housing is going to be a challenge, so housing now becomes more of a challenge, in the sense that, you have limited housing and more people are coming in. So, in other words, persons who are here are struggling to find housing, and more persons are coming in, and it's going to put more more strain on the system. So I'm not sure if that's how they're reasoning it out, but they are foreseeing some challenges, and they have, put a lid on things. The good part of it, I don't know if this will be a positive for everyone though, but it's not something that's indefinite, and that's good. There's a 2 year cap on it, and if they realize that, well, this is not going to work, then that could be lifted. But I'm sure other persons are thinking that if you're low on, let's say, housing and so on, then that industry could be boosted. If it's a case where Canada needs more people to on their shores. So a lot of things to think about. It's kind of for me. It's really interesting to see how things will unravel, because as it relates to this is pretty new, and there might be a few hiccups along the way. There might be a little bit of adaptation or alteration to this going forward, just to ensure that things run smoothly. But let's see how this one pans out. It's obvious, as you alluded to earlier, that they want graduate students, prospective graduate students. That's where their interest is, and that's where they want persons to focus, based on all the benefits, family and otherwise, being able to come along with those students, opposed to the undergraduate students. So I think they're trying to put that level forward, and as you know, they're just capping the undergrad. So lots to think about for persons who are in, thinking about migrating to Canada. And it might be a case where you will have to do some studies during these 2 years in your homeland, just to get to that level. You have some decisions to make. You have to do the math, do the calculations, and see how feasible things can be, and explore all the possibilities that can help.
Yeah, definitely some great points there, Ruren. And, just to go back to some points, and let me just read here specifically from the IRCC website. It states, In the weeks ahead, open work permits will only be available to spouses of international students in master's and doctoral programs. The spouses of international students in other levels of study, including undergraduate and college programs, will no longer be eligible. All right, so that is one update there in that context. And just to give you this update again directly from IRCC, starting September 1st, 2024, international students will begin a study program that is part of a curriculum licensing arrangement will no longer be eligible for a post-graduation work permit upon graduation. Under curriculum licensing agreements, students physically attend a private college that has been licensed to deliver the curriculum of an associated public college. These programs have seen significant growth in attracting international students in recent years. Though they have less oversight than public colleges and they act as a loophole with regards to post-graduation work permit eligibility. Graduates of master's degree programs will soon be eligible to apply for a 3-year work permit. Under current criteria, the length of a post-graduation work permit is based solely on the length of an individual study program, hindering master's graduates by limiting the amount of time they have to gain work experience and potentially transition to permanent residence. So I just want to come to this point, this last one about, the post-graduation work permit, trying to extend that to at least, a 3-year, work permit. And towards the end of that point, there was an emphasis, pretty much transitioning from, I guess, graduate student having that work experience and also moving into, the process to become a permanent resident. So to me, it would appear as if Canada is trying to set graduate students on that path to become a permanent resident. And this is pretty much what they're saying. So, having that work experience is also important in the context of CEC, that is the Canadian experience class. So you work 1 year, you have that if you're going to apply for, PR. That is very useful there in the context of that 1 year work experience. So again, we see where, there is more push or more, favor in the context of graduate students in this context. And so what is your take on this, Ruriel? I know again this is supporting your claim earlier, which I agree to a lot of extent, in the context of right now, based on the policy that we're seeing, graduate students, they're in a better position in terms of studying in Canada at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said, and as we're mentioning too, you have to just read, analyze this, get informed as much as possible so that you can make the best decision that works for you. So if it means that you need to really wait a little bit, do some more studies so that you can tap in at the graduate studies level where you're able to gain all these benefits. Or if it's a case where you're going to, push through that undergraduate studies and power through until you get to that, graduate level, you have to just get the information, and based on your situation you make those decisions. But for sure they are making sure that persons who are at that graduate level, those are the persons that will get certain benefits, and that's a good place to tap into to this Canadian system.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to go to this point here from IRCC, and I want to hear, your take on this one. In the coming months, We will continue to work to provide clear pathways to permanent residence for students with in-demand skills and explore new measures to better transition international students to the labor force. So I ask you this in the context of those attestation letters that we really do not know anything about just yet, how that selection will be done, how will students get one, what's the process? We don't know. But I am wondering, and here I see in-demand skills. What is the likelihood of these attestation letters be tied to the needs of the province in the context of the labor force that they need? And I am wondering, if you believe there will be any implications for like universities and colleges, big questions, given that you're not an expert, but just from experience and what based on the information shared by IRCC. What are your views?
Well, I think it's going to have significant, effect on all aspects of the system. I think the provinces are going to make sure that they, you know, benefit as much as possible from this. And when it comes on to the universities, now it's going to be a little bit more challenging for them because they will have to ensure that whatever policies or whatever decisions they're making is in keeping with what the provincial government wants. So, that might mean not taking some students who are doing certain courses if it means that it's going to be providing to an area where they think they're comfortable in that province in terms of the workforce. So that will definitely have certain impact on the number of persons that will be selected for a particular province, and also how that is disseminated to the different institutions. What I don't know, I'm thinking that before these changes were made, I think probably the university would set out and say, all right, would love to have a hundred international students this year. But now with the policy change and all the guidelines that are in place, maybe a college or university won't be able to award so many student spots based on the in demand jobs that they're looking for in that particular province.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I just want to highlight to our listeners, viewers, that since last December, the 1st of December last year, so December 1st, 2023, so universities, colleges, they were asked to confirm the validity of letters of acceptance. So my understanding here is that when you apply submit to IRCC, I guess they try to do some confirmation with the institution to say, okay, this student has been accepted before, issuing a study permit. So what I am seeing here from IRCC, if your school does not respond within the allotted time, your application will be returned and your processing fee will be refunded. Confirm with your school that they will validate your letter of acceptance before resubmitting your application. So that is important. So this is already in place where since last December, the 1st of December, once you submitted, this is my understanding here, is that, IRCC, they're going to confirm that acceptance with the institution, right? And if the time passes for the institution to confirm, then your application will be returned and your processing fee. I am assuming that processing fee that you'll pay to IRCC. No, it is my understanding that some institutions that have never like asked for, what would you call it now? Like it's not a register, a deposit, like a tuition deposit. They are now requesting that tuition deposit, and they're saying to you, if you know that you're not going to come to our institution, don't bother to pay the money because it won't be refunded. No, that's another conversation to have. But just to put that out there, just based on some recent knowledge, I'm just sharing that. So in that context, what institutions are, I guess, are now doing based on that recent information that was brought to my attention is that students now have to pay a tuition deposit, and that tuition deposit, I guess, will vary depending on the institution. So it could be 10,000 Canadian dollars. It could be, I'm not sure, 15,000, 5,000. Again, you just need to do your research when you're applying to these institutions. And so what they will ask for this tuition deposit, when you pay, then they give you an official, I guess, letter of acceptance that you will need to submit with your study permit application. And I guess after you have done that submission, then I guess IRCC will contact the institution to find out if this is, valid in terms of the letter of acceptance. And I guess that's in a way in terms of eliminating fraud and, ensuring that the process is true in the context of your application. So in that context, it's becoming just the process is becoming, I'll say, a little bit more challenging. And so again, it's important for you to do your research and ensure that you understand the different steps along the journey, because it's a journey. And I would say to persons, if you're thinking about coming to Canada, do your research, understand the process or the journey, but try to take it one step at a time. One step at a time, because sometimes if you look at it in its entirety, then it becomes so overwhelming. So if you know that this is something that you want to do, you want to pursue studies in Canada, do your research. And I have a video here on this channel about, that topic, doing your research. I mean, some information is changing, but it will definitely help. Ren, what would you like to share here?
For sure, research is really important so that you can make the necessary decisions that would help you to be your best as it relates to coming to Canada. The point you were making before that, as it relates to IRCC checking letters of acceptance and all of that, is really good in terms of due diligence too, because I'm just thinking, I was listening to you mentioning making that point, and I was thinking that the fact that they're checking these things means that probably there were situations in which, fraudulent documents were used and persons were, who got here. So, in that sense, it's good that they're doing their checks and balances as it relates to these things.
Yeah, for sure. And so let's now just revisit this point of, attestation letter that international undergraduate students will need from the province or territory where you plan to study. So according to IRCC, most students need to provide an attestation letter from the province or territory where they plan to study, and again, undergraduate students. And how to get an attestation letter? Each province or territory is developing a process to get an attestation letter. These processes are expected to be in place by March 31st of this year. So March 31st 2024. All right, so as of now, we don't know what that will look like, but we're keeping an eye out. And once that information becomes available, we'll definitely share with you. And if you'd like to call in to share your experience, I'm going to post that number in the chat shortly. WhatsApp call only. So if you'd like to call in to ask based on our experience, we can share based on experience and the information that is in the news. So public knowledge, again, we're not immigration lawyers or consultants. So we're sharing based on experience and public knowledge. All right. And so what IRCC is saying is that they will return any application received on or after January 22nd, 2024 without an attestation letter, unless you're exempt. So if you're a graduate student or going to study at the graduate level, then you do not need that, attestation letter. And let's just look at it. Who doesn't need an attestation letter? All right, you do not need an attestation letter when applying for a study permit if you're a minor child applying to study in a primary or secondary school. So that's K to 12, kindergarten to grade 12. You do not need that attestation letter. A student applying for a master's, PhD, or other postgraduate program. So once you're planning on studying at the graduate level, then you don't need an attestation letter. And again, you try to figure out your program. So some graduate level programs may be 1 year. So you need to figure out, do your research to find out the nature of your program. And again, based on the information that we're seeing so far, studying at the graduate level seems to be a better option right now. And a student applying to extend their study permit. So if you're in Canada and you needed to extend your study permit, then you do not need an attestation letter. But as of now, as we speak right now, if you're applying and you're applying for an undergraduate, or you have applied for an undergraduate program and you're planning on, studying in Canada and about to make your submission to IRCC, you're not able to do that right now. If you do, they're going to return your application. You have to wait until that process is complete in terms of getting that attestation letter to support your application. And again, this is for undergraduate, programs. And then, there are other requirements in terms of, studying in Canada. But what I want to highlight here is, financial support. And so Canada recently updated this information in the context of the minimum funds needed to support yourself as a student. And I guess this is also for, undergrad and graduate, students. So just to let you know about this. So we're pretty much after January 1st, 2024. So I'll just share that with you. So for one applicant, so let's look at this number of family members, including the applicant. So one person, if you're just the applicant, you need to show proof of $20,635. All right. And this amount is what you would require per year. And it does not include your tuition. So if you were to make your application, so in the sense where it's just you coming to study in Canada, you need to show $20,635 plus whatever your tuition is going to be. So if your tuition is going to be, say, 15,000, then you need to add that to the $20,635. All right. And I'm going to post this link in the description box after this, live ends so that you can always go there to see this information again. You can read and see, what we're saying. Read for yourself, do your own research. So, for example, now, because if you were coming, so once it reaches two persons, you know that perhaps you're a graduate student, right, Rurian? Because if two persons say you're coming with your spouse or common law partner, you will need 25,690 Canadian dollars plus your tuition. All right. And so the figure goes up, depending on the number of persons, coming. All right. So just to let you know that. Ruren, do you have, anything that you'd like to share here while I just drop this number in the chat for the
Well,
listener?
just to underscore what you have just said, you have to do the research as it relates to the financial aspect, because they're requiring you to show a certain amount of money, and you have to match that to the number of family members that will be coming with you. And remember, this is only applicable to the graduate studies level. So if you're going to be pursuing a master's or doctoral studies, so that's something that you have to bear in mind. Just make sure that you have done your research, because you don't, that's a lot of money to find. And even if you're someone who has that money, then you don't want to be spewing that money around, wrongly. So it's always good to do the research so that you are informed, and the decisions are that you will make will be informed ones, and that you can get the best value for the money that you're spending.
Yeah, for sure. Some good points there. Research is definitely important. So I'm just popping this WhatsApp number in the chat. There you go. So if you'd like to call in, you can definitely call and talk. Would love to hear from you. All right. So again, it's just WhatsApp call only. Let us know, are you planning on studying in Canada? And this information is not to discourage anyone. We're just here to provide information and to support, our viewers, listeners, subscribers as best as we can, and to just let you know what is happening based on our perspective, based on public knowledge, and just to keep you informed. And so we're just kind of weighing what is happening in terms of undergraduate, as opposed to graduate level. And so we're seeing where, again, things are perhaps are going to change, because usually, and this is from experience, the tuition at the graduate level is usually lower than the tuition at the undergrad level. All right. So with this development, and it's interesting to see what will happen. So, Ruren, do you believe that we will see an increase in tuition fees at the graduate level based on these developments?
Well, I think you could almost say yes to that one, because the universities has their budget that they're working on, and it has to balance. So if it means that they need to increase the fees in order to ensure that balance takes place, considering that maybe that influx from undergrad is not going to be as substantial, then that might be something that they would consider.
Yeah, I get that too. And that might be a case, but if provinces are looking out and seeing what is happening, because you have some provinces, and this is just me kind of picking at the policy now, just my views here. You have some provinces, say for example, Ontario, right? where their intake in terms of international students is very high, I would say. And then you have some provinces, like the prairie provinces, where I guess their intake perhaps lower, right? So, in the context now of this cap, where it appears the federal government is going to give each province, I guess, a figure from that, I believe 360,000, applications, study permit applications that they're willing to take this year. So I guess each province is going to, or territory is going to get a number or a figure, right? And I believe that those provinces that are usually having like a lot, for example, Ontario, they're perhaps going to feel it the most as opposed to other provinces. So, my thing here is if, certain provinces can keep their tuition low, right? They would stand to, I guess, in a better position in terms of being a choice for international students, as opposed to perhaps like Ontario, who might see the need to increase tuition fees based on the reduction in terms of international students coming in. I'm just trying, I'm just saying that. That's what I'm thinking here. I'm not sure if I'm making sense to you. What do you think?
Well, you're making perfect sense, and the thing is too, persons who are applying, I guess it's always good to have a plan B and a plan C probably. So if you're going to be targeting, let's say, an Ontario, and that were to happen, then you might need to find, or move on to your another province, which would be your second or your third choice, just to ensure that whatever you are planning on pursuing, comes comes through. So that's something that persons would have to bear in mind as well. But you're making perfect sense. But I want to throw this question back at you with that kind of scenario that you created as it relates to Ontario, because we're not sure exactly what will happen. Do you foresee some of those smaller institutions taking a big hit from this? And probably that would affect their staffing and so on. What do you think about?
Smaller, smaller institutions, like, for example, in Ontario?
Yes, in Ontario, yeah.
That's a very good question. And, you know, a lot of, I guess a lot of us may not understand, but just from my understanding and, reading and just following up this, development, it would appear that international students, they do a lot in terms of balancing, I guess, the budget or the books, or contributing to, universities, colleges. And so with a reduction in, say, for example, Ontario, where you have, smaller institutions or, colleges, universities, I feel that it is fair to say that they may feel, some negative implications of this development in the context of, their finances and perhaps programs too, because if you have certain programs that were funded by international students, then you may see programs being cut. And if programs are cut, then then it's likely that, the staff, so faculty is going to be cut as well. So some persons may be out of a job, and so that's a fair question. And I feel like I'm giving a fair response because there's going to be some implications, right? And what I've seen, or just it's going to be negative, especially where you have been relying so much on, international students to fund certain programs. And so for those of you who do not know, international students pay far more than, domestic students, Canadian students. And so what we can, perhaps it's fair to say too that some programs that Canadian students benefit from, perhaps are funded by international students. I guess that's fair to say. I don't know. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, that is highly possible and highly likely too, because the fact that spaces are there, or colleges, universities were really open to accepting applications or accepting persons to come into their institutions like that, then it's a business, to be honest. So it must be beneficial to them in some regard. So if that amount of students fall significantly or changes in any way or form, then they will be affected.
But yeah, and another update here is that I believe it's the Minister for Immigration, Mark Miller. He was saying, in the spirit of fairness, we are also allocating the cap space by province based on population. So if you're doing that on population, Ontario is perhaps going to still get the largest from that, right? If you're doing it based on population, that's what I am assuming.
Well, I guess so. Well, as I said, it's a lot to figure out at once. But if they're going to use population sizes, then I guess Ontario would get a huge chunk of that. So probably that would kind of balance things out a bit, maybe. The
Yeah,
process that a little bit.
but then I am not sure what their number is like for each year. So, I don't know what their number is like for each year. But if you're taking like 360, then 1,000, then, and you think about dividing that, you kind of see where we're falling where that is concerned. And you have some big universities that have, a large international student population. And, Ontario, they have lots of universities there. We're not even talking about colleges yet. And so when you think about, each province and usually have, some large universities that perhaps will have a good intake of international students, you wonder what this will look like. But again, it's just, interesting developments here, and we're here to see, how things are unfolding and definitely sharing with you. Please comment in the chat. Let me just refresh this chat to see if I'm missing any updates. Welcome if you're just tuning in. Please remember to hit the like button, the share button, as well as the subscription button. All right. And comment in the chat. Not seeing any new comments here in the chat just yet. And remember, the phone number to call is also in the chat. So if you'd like to call in, you can give us a call over WhatsApp. All right. So we're here, and perhaps a few more minutes before we wrap up this conversation, but we still have a few minutes to go. I'm still not seeing the chat, but I guess hopefully it will come up. All right. Not quite. Right, there we go. All right, not seeing any new updates there in the chat. And let me check. I don't believe I'm missing any calls. But, all in all, and I'm going to go back to your very, very early statement to say that, perhaps it's going to be better studying at the graduate level right now, than at the undergraduate level. So I guess.
For sure. And everything is, being put toward that level. And, I think it is also strategic because, like, how many persons would be able to qualify for that too? So it's showing that there is something happening at the undergrad level where they think that persons of that level of qualification or interest is quite adequate or almost adequate for Canada. So they're not placing as much focus. They're trying to place the focus where the needs are. And just to go back to the point about the amount of students that will be sent to each province, I was just thinking about it a bit more, and the fact that there's a cap on it, it's going to affect the institutions regardless of how much um, international students will be accepted in a particular province. Because you're thinking about, 360,000 versus an unlimited amount. So it's going to impact in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely an impact there. And again, and I just need to highlight too, I think I missed this in sharing that in the context of, undergraduate students and not getting that, work permit for their spouse, that is excluding like professional programs. So, for example, law and medicine. So, if you were doing that, then your spouse, for example, would be eligible for a open work permit. So, law and medicine, for example, those are exceptions. But in general, generally speaking, undergraduate students, their spouse or spouses, our common law partners will not be eligible for an open work permit. And they said in, I guess, the weeks ahead. I'm not sure when that will be implemented specifically, like a specific date and time, but just to let you know. And right now, in any case, an undergraduate student is not able to submit an application. I mean, you can submit it, but if you do, it will be returned to you. So I figure that IRCC has the time now to make those changes and to do that, because at this point it makes no sense as an undergraduate student submitting an application, because again you will need that attestation letter from the province that you're planning to study in. But again, Rorian, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the next 2 years regarding this cap on international student permits will look like, and wanting to hear, what or how the government of Canada will move on in this context. And so, but definitely some impact there for international students, and family is a big one, especially for undergraduate students who are spending so much on tuition. So it's a lot there, and spending so much trying to balance studies and in cases working and just wanting that emotional support and connection. But I guess they'll say, they can get a visitor's visa. I don't know. But still, knowing that you have that support is very important to, I believe, any student, success, and especially when you're coming to a foreign place. And so that can be, very impactful, or will be, I believe, in that context. But do you believe, Ruben, that given these new updates, that
Yeah.
prospective students may choose to look at, other countries apart
Well,
from pursue their
for
education?
sure, for sure, and that's That's what we have been saying earlier. You know, you have to get the information and see what works best with your situation. So if it is not working for, let's say, Canada, and there's somewhere else where you're seeing that you're getting better in terms of an offer, and you know, and probably a better way going forward, then so be it, you go for it. So, but the most important thing is to research so that you're making an informed decision. But just to talk about Canada in a sense, then persons will, if they definitely want to come to Canada, they will maybe one wait for that 2 years, or two upgrade themselves so that they can, you know, get in at that graduate level so that they can reap the benefits. So it's going to be down that line. And I'm just thinking about it is the amount of monies that you would have to have for school fee, and to, you know, for, let's say, you're going to, the amount of money for school fees, I guess you would have to look and say, all right, if am I able to find this, and would it be more meaningful for me to just upgrade myself in my homeland before, you know, migrating to Canada? So that's going to be an interesting, you know, question or interesting decision that persons will have to make in order to decide whether they come now, or they come at a point later where they might be able to, you know, benefit more. So that's, I think that's where the big question will be for most persons. And you know, another thing will be too, where if you plan on coming, are you okay to come without your family if you're going to be in that graduate, sorry, undergrad level? So you know, lots to think about, and you know, in order to make your decision. So, you know, make sure that you have the necessary information, and, you know, you explore this and think about it critically before you commit to any particular decision.
I get what you're saying, and I feel that there's all right. I don't know if I should say this, but I feel that if you're coming alone, there are ways that perhaps you can get that support that you need, right? In Canada. All right. So I guess that's another option to look at it another way, because you have policies, you have gray areas. They're not always black and white. I'll just say that and leave it there. And again, I'm just talking from experience, what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. Again, not a lawyer or immigration consultant. All right. But in the context of, you mentioned about perhaps waiting, upgrading qualification, and I would perhaps have a little caution there. I'm very cautious with that because we don't know what next year or the next 2 years are going to look like. So what I am saying, if you're interested in studying in Canada, and this is where you really want to study, and you can do your research and see what the process will require as it relates to you studying here, and you're able to do it, I'll say go for it. And just understand that it's going to be more challenging, given the cost associated with studying in Canada, not just tuition, but living expenses, and sometimes the possibility of not finding a job. And so you'll just have to do your research and try to have a plan B. So just in case plan A doesn't work out, you have a plan B. Because we don't know what will happen after 2 years. It could be that, after you say, okay, Canada is doing this for 2 years, I'm going to try and get, some qualification in my homeland, and then after 2 years, I am going to apply as a grad student. Then this policy could change in 2 years. So we don't know. We don't know. And so, they say make A while the sun is shining. So if the sun is shining for you, do that. Just do it like Nike. And again, changes can happen at any given point, right? And so we are not too sure what this will mean. They did say the cap will be for 2 years. And I guess they will come back and tell us, what this means moving forward. Or it could be that if institutions were to push back and say this is not working, will the government reverse these decisions? And so lots there to consider in that context. So again, we are not too sure what is going to happen, but if you I'm saying right now, like say you're planning on coming, you can consider the options right now. What we're saying, it looks more favorable for someone who is going to study at the graduate level. And again, we're also balancing that in the context where tuition fees can increase for graduate students because usually, based on experience, tuition fees at the undergraduate level is far more expensive than the graduate level for international students, right? And so, in that context, we don't know if we're going to see an increase in tuition fees for students at the graduate level, given the recent updates from IRCC. And again, we mentioned the fact that some universities, they depend on international students to fund certain, I guess, props programs, whatever it may be, but they depend on their contribution. And so what that might look differently moving forward. And so I'm sure that institutions are going to go back to the drawing board, having their meetings and to see how best they can move forward, and it's just going to be different. So in the context here too, there's another factor that we need to consider because immigration is a federal responsibility, but when it comes down to education, it's a provincial responsibility. So the federal government, so Mr. Trudeau's government is not responsible for education. They are responsible for immigration, all right? So that's a federal responsibility, immigration. But when it comes down to schools, that's a provincial responsibility. So that's for the government of Ontario, the government of Alberta, the government of British Columbia, wherever that institution is, it's a responsibility of that province. And so with province to getting some, what would you say, some control over programming in terms of this attestation letter, we're also wondering if provinces are going to tie this letter based on in-demand jobs or what they need in terms of the province. So we could see that looking different, in different that letter or support, whatever it is, that attestation letter might look different in different provinces. We're not sure because we don't know what that will look like and how they're going to issue that letter. Will it be a case where, say, for example, let's say Rurian is a province and I am a province, and Rurian got say 50 letters or 50 is Rurian's number, and then you have like 150 students applying to Rurian's province, right? And Rurian now has 50 support attestation letter to issue. How will Rurian issue that letter? So think about Rurian is perhaps going to think about his needs and what he would want to see in terms of programming. And it could just be that. And the next thing could be that now each institution will require a deposit, right? A tuition deposit. So if you're not able to pay that by the specific time, then you're no longer on that list. So you're removed and they move forward with students who are able to pay that, tuition deposit. And then that's perhaps how the letters may be distributed. I am not sure, and I'm just coming up with some possible, solutions here or recommendation in terms of, the attestation letter. But again, we'll just have to wait and see how, things are going. And based on the cutoff time, the federal government gave the provinces up until March 31st of this year. So by that time, we'll definitely get some more information, or even before that. So I don't know, Ruben, do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, just excited to see how things, will work out. Just excited to see, if there will be anything that, changes over the time period, and just to see how this, this whole new policy will be implemented, and how it will impact all the different stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure, lots to look out for in this context. And again, we'll be sharing, updates with you as best as we can. All right, I am not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm not seeing anything there yet in the chat. And let me just double check here. I'm just double checking here, just refreshing the chat here. No, not seeing any new comments or new updates there in the chat. But I guess that's all for now that we have to share. And I believe we have shared, what is there in the news, what is public knowledge based on, information from IRCC and just, our experience. And we're hoping for the best for international students in Canada and also for prospective students. Again, it is very important for you to do your research regarding, programs and levels of study. So undergraduate or, at the graduate level, that is definitely important. Think about your personal situation and what you would like for yourself. That is definitely important in the context of your research. And just, read. It's going to be a process or a journey, and understand what the process will involve, and then just take it one step at a time. That's my, recommendation to you. Rurian, do you have any final, thoughts?
Well, as you were saying, take it one day at a time, one step at a time, one task at a time. And I will always say this, yeah, and I'll share this too with you. The hardest step is going to be that first one. But once you get that, wheel moving, once you get that process moving, then if you keep on going, you will follow through on that. So it might seem daunting at the beginning, but everything that you get out of the way is one thing less. And let nothing, no barrier, no obstacle stand in front of your dream.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Rurian, for joining in on this conversation. And thanks to all the viewers, listeners, subscribers who tuned in and will tune in to just listen to this one. And again, all the best. And remember to hit the like button, the subscription button, the share button, and yes, tell a friend to tell another friend about the Voices in Education. Voices in Education is a safe space where we share and learn from each other. We do that in a respectful way to ensure that we're maintaining this safe space where you feel a sense of belonging, where you feel valued. Thank you so much and stay tuned, and blessings and love, everyone. Bye for now.